Tonight's show is going to start off very different.
I've always wondered what it's like to be in the public eye, a celebrity. Must be exciting when you're in studio and set designers and wardrobe consultants and makeup artists and people trying to produce great content and script fantastic words, and every day you're interviewing a different celebrity. But what happens when you leave that studio and that spotlight follows you and those viewers that watch you every night have framed you in a certain way and almost expect you to be that way every day? And some are even so grotesque that they shame you in social media. Well, that's what I thought the show was going to be about today. My guest is Cheryl Hickey. For 18 years, she was the co-host of Entertainment Tonight Canada.
I started, a single woman on that show. I met my husband, had both of my kids, learned so much, grew so much.
I thought we were going to talk about that private and public life and some of the people that she interviewed, and we certainly touch on that. But what you're going to find in this show is so much more.
At the beginning, it was they wanted me to just with Rick, and I was like,
Cheryl Hickey is a beautiful human being.
And I've always been nervous to step forward myself. I love a partner, a co-host, a cast. But me, that's what the hardest part about ET Canada was.
She has such gratitude for the small town she's been raised, the lessons in life from her parents. She's going to share with you some powerful lessons in life for what we're all going through, transitions.
Because they have to be, because the industries are changing, all industries are changing. And you've just got to evolve, put your head down, find out what you love to do, and find a way to make it work.
Rugs being pulled from underneath us, people trying to hold us back, or passions that we know we should be chasing, but we don't have the courage to do so.
It's okay to fail. It's okay to start again. It's okay to try.
And I think the most important thing we're going to learn from Cheryl is how to listen generously, not just to the people that you're talking with, but inside, listen to what makes you happy. Listen to the passions and pursuits you should be chasing.
We're supposed to create and inspire each other and start again. That's the point.
There's so much to Cheryl Hickey, and I hope you feel after listening the way I felt after interviewing her. Hi, it's Tony Chapman. Thank you for listening to Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC. If you can, please subscribe to the podcast. And ratings and reviews, well, they're always welcome and they're always appreciated. Cheryl Hickey, welcome to Chatter That Matters.
Hey.
Cheryl Hickey, I always, in my mind, you were this red carpet superstar that just had Manhattan as your background, but it turns out you grew up in Shallow Lake near Owen Sound. That's a pretty small town.
It sure is. And we had one little convenience store called Ed Allen's Convenience Store, and they used to sell the best penny candy.
What's the values that you take out of a small town? Because, Hollywood always has this folklore of the small town, and you just, you go to the big city, but you never take the small town girl out of it.
I think part of it is an appreciation for connection and an appreciation for a slower pace. And I think that I've been able deep inside to hold on to that. There's been times I've been like, whoa, my head is spinning, certainly. But I think that at the core of who I am, I can still mentally go back to that place and find myself again. That's something that I am so grateful for.
Do you ever feel like a square peg in a round hole where you're involved in the dynamics of what's happening that's just busy? You question even why you left. That sort of almost sounds like a utopia.
That's the beauty of this life, evolving and changing and growing and experiencing different things is why we're all here. I was blessed enough to have this really incredible childhood where we played in the back 40, right? And we just ran around and climbed trees and then rode our bikes on gravel roads with no helmets. But, did all these things where you created this sense of adventure. And then my life took me in because I dreamed a lot. I daydreamed, I envisioned, I played and imagined of what I could be and who I could be. I had no goalpost, but no, I don't feel like a round peg in a square hole because I know that life is about changing.
One of the things that I read was and I love this quote when your dad said, I think you're age 16, Cheryl, you talk a lot. Maybe you should volunteer at the local TV station. And I just cracked up because who would have thought just trying to quieten you down would suddenly turn into this incredible television career? So how did that all come about?
Well, my brother and I used to compete for talking time at the dinner table. And it used to drive my mother crazy and my sister, because my sister's like the quieter one. I think I was just always curious about everything. I asked a million questions. And when my parents would watch Barbara Walters at night, I'd kind of like sneak in and kind of peer and watch. I remember she bought me this microphone, and there was a point in time when I was like, I'm going to be like Whitney Houston. But then I turned it and I was like, okay, well, what else can I do with this? So I would interview my family and walk around and do that. And so my parents were clever enough to be like, hey, let's figure out what this girl is doing naturally and see if we can push her into a direction that just feels right. And they did. And I'm very grateful for that.
You went to Fanshawe College studying radio and television arts. Not that I'm dating you, but back then, radio and television was the place to be. I mean, it was exciting. And so what did you learn in that school that you feel was important enough that it stayed with you as you started to build this illustrious career?
Things actually aren't that different. And here's what I'll say, because I remember back then, our profs and other people, graduates, saying, it is a terrible time to get into this business. There is no work. Things aren't da-da-da-da. It's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. And if you listen to it, then you would never find your way. You'd be like, oh, well, then I guess I better not do this. And boom. That's the same message broadcast journalism and radio students are being told today, that there's no room. When in fact, if you look at it differently, the landscape is huge and vast, and you can create your own channel. There's so much that you can actually do. Look what you're doing. It's all in how you look at it. The forms are changing and evolving, but the opportunity is still there. So I think back then, I remember hearing that and being like, no, I really love this. This makes my heart full. I'm going to keep going. Definitely feeling like a bit of an underdog because my profs didn't really take me seriously. Some of them did, but some of them didn't. I just remember just the grit. The grit was important. 3 a.m, your eyes are bleeding. You're just like, I'm so tired trying to finish this project. But just having a resolve and holding on to that.
It's a great insight in terms of friction versus fuel, where so often today we just tell people there's so much friction out there that why bother even trying? And I just love the way you framed it to say there's always opportunity. I want to talk to you about your first entry into the world, the new VR in Barrie, and how you didn't just wait for opportunities. You decided that you're going to start creating them.
I started out, I think, as a PA. My gosh, I remember having so much anxiety around writing Lance Chilton, the news anchor's tease. Like I was just frozen. And then quickly I was like, okay, well, I don't want to stay in this position. What else can I do? So I started shadowing the cameramen and women. One woman, Audra Brown, she still works at City TV, and she was kind enough, along with some of the other guys, after my shift was done at 6:00, I would then go out at night and follow them and kind of learn about the camera. And then there was a broken down one that they eventually let me take out alongside of them. So while they were shooting, I was shooting. And then I would come back at 11:00, stay until like 3 or 4 editing my own stuff just to like see if I could get the feel of a cut. And then eventually I would shoot my own stand up the reporter would go back into the truck, and then I'd go and shoot my own stand up, edit myself in, and I would just give those tapes to the news director. At the time, the news director, I didn't know, but he would just file them underneath his desk. He wasn't sending them downtown to City TV, which was where at the time all the decisions were made. And then the creative directors came to me and said, listen, we have 5 minutes in the middle of a soap opera that we have to fill with an interstitial. Can you create one? And I was like, yes. And then immediately it was like, oh crap. With what? I don't know. So I decided at the time that I was going to create something in the middle of a soap opera where people could write in their questions. Then I would contact the PR people down at Days of Our Lives and ask them the questions that people wanted to know. And then in that 5 minutes, I would give them their response. A really nice maintenance guy there in the building gave me an old room in the garage and gave me a can of purple paint and said, have at her, kiddo. If you can make a set, it's yours. And I painted this whole room. I found a ceramic cat in the garage, put it in there as decoration. And literally a week later, one of the other team members came up with the name Lather Up with Cheryl Hickey. My dad was so angry at that. He was like, no one's going to take you seriously. And I was like, but it's funny. Anyway, that ended up being the name. And we went to air. And it was a little something where I ad-libbed every day for 5 minutes. It's like working a muscle. And it was fantastic. And then the news director in Toronto, Paul Rogers, heard about me through another cameraman, said, I'd like to come up and take you out for coffee. I've heard a lot about you. He offered me a new job where they were creating a helicopter role for a camera person, a reporter, but also a videographer on the evening shift. And then it kind of took off.
It took off, but you were scared of heights.
Oh my gosh, definitely afraid of heights. In fact, I tried not to take the job, which is part of the story. I went back to my news director at the New VR and said, what can you give me? Long story short, he said, I'll give you one slot on Sunday nights, but I made you who you are. And eventually Lance Chilton, the news anchor there, said to me, if you don't take this job, this will be the biggest mistake of your life. Like, you need to lean into the fear. I'd never driven in Toronto. I was deathly afraid of heights. All I knew was a small town. And then I just remember being like, okay, I'm going to take it.
How often did you come across people that, as you succeeded, wanted to take credit, wanted to let you know it was because of them and not the fact this was Cheryl Hickey at 3 a.m. painting purple on the wall and finding ceramic cats? What advice can you give to others when somebody's trying to jump in on a spotlight that you've actually lit?
The only time that it's really happened in a really big way was with that previous boss. He really, I feel, didn't want me to succeed, and he didn't really believe in me. And when I took the job in Toronto, he told me that he taught me everything I know, and how dare I, and actually yelled at me for like 45 minutes. I remember thinking, this is not how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be happy for me. And I've been showing you all of my things, trying to get going here.
Yeah.
You can't control what other people do, and you can't control what other people think, but you can control how you act. And so I try to focus on that.
Do you think when you write your memoirs one day, those times in life where people put up those obstacles and you found a way around it, do you think you're going to be some of the memories you treasure the most? It's also about finding your way around, above, through, underneath, whatever you needed to do to kind of turn this obstacle into a stepping stone.
They're there as lessons. We know they are. And sometimes they repeat and you're like, wait, I've seen this kind of person before, or I've seen this before. Am I going to act the same way? Or am I going to learn from the last cycle and act differently and see if this keeps reappearing?
So the call that changed everything was Entertainment Tonight Canada. You were initially passed over for the role. So I'd love for you to share how that show came about, because it was a defining moment for you. And I would say that you helped define Canadian television for 18 years. So I'd love to hear the background story.
Well, I was working at Global News. I think I went from a court reporter to, I was working the 3 to 11 shift. And then I think one day I ended up doing like a quirky story of some sort. And Paul was like, what is this side of you? And he started to allow me to do more entertainment and lifestyle stories. When bands would come to town, I would go down to the then Sky Dome and do lives and things like that. And that started to really build. And then I really realized that, wow, I love entertainment. I love making people smile. I love talking about things that highlight other people. And it just spoke to me. We got wind that Entertainment Tonight was, I think I went up to Barb Williams' office a year before and said to her, is there any way I could be a Canadian correspondent for Entertainment Tonight? And she was like, I don't know. Kind of went away. It died. Then about a year later, I heard that they were going to be doing an entertainment show. So I thought, I need to audition for this. So then they started bringing people in, Zev Shalev and whatever. And I asked to go and do a read. I went and did a read. I did a chemistry read with some guy. I don't know who he was. And my cubicle was in the back of the room. And then I continually saw all these beautiful models and accomplished broadcasters and some of my friends going by my desk to also go audition for like a couple weeks. And I thought, oh, wow, there's no way I'm getting this job. Like, these people are way more qualified than I, and, beautiful and stunning. And like, they were looking for someone to like pow and hit it. And they said as much. So I remember one time, I think I went for a callback and they said, here's the deal. We don't want someone people know, and we don't want someone blonde haired, blue eyed. And and I know it's a casting thing. Like, they're trying to build a team. And so I was like, okay, well, there's not much you can do with that. I can't really, it is what it is. And I am already known on Global News. So, okay. I was frustrated and sad and all the feelings that you feel, but it stirred something up in me where I was like, but I know I want more and I know I want to change. I did the logical thing that any broadcaster would do is I booked a trip to Australia to go see a boy. I was like, you know what? I'm out of here. I need a break. I'm gone. I know that I'm changing. I know that I'm evolving. I got to see. So I come back from this vacation and I knew that I loved Global. It was my home, but I knew I needed more. So my plan in my brain was I was going to start looking at what else was out there. And I came back and they said, can we have a meeting? And literally, I was in this big boardroom. It was Barb Williams, Zev Shalev. And they were like, hey, we're going to do this entertainment show. We'd like you to be the host with Rick Campanelli. And by the way, it's called Entertainment Tonight. And I just remember looking through both of them. What is happening? Like my whole world just spun. I didn't think it was me. All of a sudden, the CBS executives were down. They were building a set. We were practicing and rehearsing. And then the imposter syndrome took over and I was panicking. Do they know I don't know how to host a show? Like I've never done this before. But I was terrified. I remember being at our press conference and my voice was shaking. And I was like, all right, did they get the right person? Like, are we okay?
But isn't that part of when you stand on a tightrope so high? I mean, you talk about your fear of heights. This is your emotional fear of heights. You have no idea how you're going to get to the other side. Everybody's believing in you. So they're just like, they're not even worrying about a safety net. That's the difference between someone that dreams and like you did as a young kid and someone that does, is you just have to find your way on that tightrope.
I've always felt comfortable in a team, and I find it very hard to step forward on my own. So I'm evolving right now in this space because I'm doing it on my own. And that is stepping out again. And it's exciting and it's scary and it's fun and it's all those things. And if we didn't love what we do so much, you'd stop.
One of the interviews that you did, this small town girl now out in front, putting a microphone in front of the Beyoncés and the Ryan Reynolds and dozens of others. And you said that, interesting enough, it was your shallow lake personality that allowed you to connect, because you connected from a sort of a position almost of authenticity as opposed to being, just fawning over these celebrities. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think for the average listener, most people would freeze if they were in front of a celebrity like a Beyonce. But to me, when I watched you on television, it was just you ran into an old high school friend.
I wish people could see, and maybe some people see this in the behind the scenes stuff now. When a celebrity walks up on a red carpet, you see this moment in their face. They're scared. They're nervous. They're trying to put themselves out there and promote whatever they're paid to promote. And they're just people. Doesn't mean that I don't get excited and a little bit nervous to meet someone, but that means you care. It means you're still engaged. You're still in it. But at the end of the day, we're all people. We're all from somewhere. We're someone's daughter, we're someone's best friend. That's what connects us all. And so if you can find those moments in conversation and get lost in those moments in conversation, then you're going to get something real. And it doesn't happen all the time, but most of the time, if you're really paying attention and you're a really good listener, when you're interviewing someone, you get those moments.
Barbara Walters. This is someone you must have watched as a very young child when you were playing with your microphone. You talk about choosing your moral compass over a sort of gotcha question. Unpack that.
She had a book, I think it was, and I remember reading the book and cramming for this interview and just being so excited. I mean, Barbara Walters, Oprah, those are your pinnacles of female journalists, like the people like that I really admired and watched over the years. So I had this opportunity to interview her and I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. And in the book, I quoted something that she said. She said, no, I didn't say that. And I remember, picking a moment of, you're a journalist, you're not a fan. So you stick with the plan, you stick with what you know, and I did. But there's also a way of doing it with grace and kindness. You don't have to make a big moment of it. You don't have to expose someone. You can do it in a way that is respectful and kind. And what ended up happening after that is I ended up getting a handwritten letter mailed to me from Barbara Walters talking about how much she enjoyed the interview and how much she appreciated our time together. It's not bowing down to the moment and disappearing. It's about leaning into it, but being confident, but also being courteous and kind. And all of that matters at the end of the day. It just does.
What Entertainment Tonight interview do you wish you could do over?
Ooh.
I wish my listeners could see your giggle right now.
And there's one, and I've posted this video before, but it was at the Grammys with Bruno Mars. I'm a huge Bruno Mars fan. Love him, love him. Love him on Saturday Night Live. Like, I just think he's so talented, from his dancing to his songwriting to he gets up to sing a song to me. When I see your face. And I think my face had fear, and he just stopped and he was like, yeah, and I'm done. But he didn't realize I was so into it. But I think he thought I wasn't. Anyway, it was like a miscue. It was like an awkward moment. I forgot I was on TV and just was like, oh.
A chapter in the book that we're going to write together, I'm not going to write it, but I'm going to get you some of it because I want your book, is the best interview I ever had.
Again, this was before ET Canada. I had the opportunity to interview the late Quincy Jones. He's a creator, really. Like, he's touched TV, he's touched music. And there's very few artists that he didn't have a hand in creating some of their music or their art, you name it. It was so good. So he leaves. My cameraman and I are like, whoa, mind blown. How are we going to make this a 2-minute story? This is crazy. We're packing up. This is at like the Four Seasons or something. We get a knock on the door about 30 minutes later, and it's Quincy Jones. And he's like, this conversation was so much fun. Can I get a chocolate bar to the mini bar and sit back down? It's like, yes. And then we put the camera back up. We roll a little bit more. And he just told stories of his life. And it's like, it was fascinating. I'm so grateful to people like Oprah Winfrey, who just took me up on stage and said my name in the Cheryl Hickey, like the John Mayers of the world and the Taylor Swifts and Jan Arden. Like, I've had wonderful conversations with people.
Sidebar, I mean, people might think that the job is 1 hour a day. I was in the Entertainment Tonight. I was on the show a couple of times. I know how much it takes to produce that show. How did you manage to also find time to meet your husband, get married, have 2 kids? How do you balance both of those? Because, and it's not that the word compromise or trade-off, but I know how important both are to you. So how did you find a way to prioritize one over the other at times so that you could have the best of both worlds?
There's no such thing as balance. I truly believe that. There just isn't. Sometimes this gets more attention and sometimes this gets more attention. That said, my kids have always been at the forefront of my life. But I also should say, with a show like Entertainment Tonight, you just see me out there, but it is an entire crew working tirelessly. That's the thing I always used to say. If you could see our crew, if you could see our cameraman, if you could see our floor director, Double J, for me to do the things I do and have the time that I have, it's those people. I went back to work after 4 months of having my son, and it was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. It's one of my biggest regrets also. But truthfully, I was afraid of losing my job. You don't dare take an entire year off. There were times where I'd be in my dressing room pumping and crying. My hormones are crazy. I haven't slept in days. And now I've got to put a dress on and pretend everything's okay and go interview this big celebrity. Like, I know, you're like, woe is me also. But it's a very real thing, whether you're working on an entertainment show live in front of a lot of people, or you're working in an office and you're a mom and you have to go back. Like, I'm not going to say that it was easy all the time, because it just wasn't.
And that's something that society really has to come to terms with. The fear of losing your job because you're at home doing what you want to do more than anything in the world is take care of your newborn. I have to believe you must have turned on the television set to see who was doing your role. And it must have been really tough on you when you should have been just home celebrating life.
No, I wasn't turning on the role and worried about the person who was filling in for me, because I was also just happy for them. I think where I struggled the most, and it wasn't with the job, I knew intrinsically in me that my kid needed me. We know the importance of 0 to 3, that mom connection. We know how big it is. So I had a lot of guilt around that and a lot of fear and worry around that. And then when it came to my job, I wanted them to know I was still as dedicated, but I also did have at the time a boss who was pretty good at making sure that I still was able to be there for my kids. We also moved to be closer to the station, my husband and I. So I was 5 minutes from the station. I would always whip home and do what I needed to do. So,
you talked about in one interview how people would body shame you for being pregnant. How do you come to terms with that because there's a price that you paid to be a celebrity?
Funny, I don't see myself as a celebrity. That's the weird part. Sure, to say that sometimes it doesn't hurt would be a lie. But also, I always would try to remember it says more about that person than it does about me. Because if you're a person who can put that out on social media and say those things or say that behind someone's back, you got a lot more going on than I would care to recognize. But there were more kind, loving, and supportive comments. So it's kind of like you get more of what you pay attention to, right? Wherever you put your attention is what you get more of. So I just, a lot of the time, just wouldn't give it energy. I didn't give it air. And also my body was evolving. Me as a person was evolving. And that's okay.
When we return, Cheryl Hickey's career and life is firing on all cylinders. But one afternoon when she's swimming with her kids, suddenly her heart fires out of control. How does someone that wants it all and has it all deal with the reality of it's not always your choice?
Hi, it's Tony Chapman, host of Chatter That Matters. Great leadership is where we make things happen versus just simply watch and wonder what happened. And a big shout out to RBC for investing their intellectual and financial capital to help lead the way so Canadians can thrive and our communities prosper. Olympics, the arts, the youth, climate change, and much more. Leadership matters to RBC.
Even now, it's like, no, I have to step forward myself. And that's my biggest challenge right now. That's terrifying to me. So I've been in a group or in a co-host position for so long. I don't even know how to step out on my own. And so that's my lesson right now. That's my growth.
Joining me today is Cheryl Hickey. For 18 years, she graced your silver screen as the host of Entertainment Tonight Canada. What I thought was going to be a show about interviews and celebrity, well, I'm celebrating because this show is about life and transitions and dreaming and doing. 2018, I believe, you had a serious health crisis.
2018, it was September, it was Film Festival, which everybody who knows entertainment and knows, the scene sort of in Toronto, time of year is really busy. It's back to school, it's Toronto International Film Festival, it's all of it. So those are days where you're working around the clock, you're going. I actually got shingles right before Film Festival on my back. I remember telling my boss, this happened. She's like, we need you. You go on this medication and you do what you need to do and you get going, as anybody does, right? Like we've all pushed ourselves and you just keep going. So I did, kept going, go. It was the end of Film Festival. I was out in the back with the kids. I was actually swimming with the kids. And I remember feeling my arms being really heavy and my whole body being really heavy. Made my way to the shallow end. And I stood up and again, my body just like it wasn't operating properly. And I screamed at the kids to get out of the pool. And I knocked on the window to my husband and I was like, something's wrong. And my heart rate started to really go up. And I went into the bedroom, immediately changed, put some clothes on. And I went to the front of the house, oddly. And I remember my kids sitting in the bay window. And I said to my husband, go get our neighbor who's a nurse, an ER nurse or a nurse. She came over and she's like, yeah, something's wrong. We're going to need to call an ambulance. I was going into AFib. That's atrial fibrillation, where your heart rate goes up really, really high. So the ambulance comes. I remember being on the stretcher and watching my kids' faces. And that's something that just horrifies me. Anyway, went to the hospital. They tried to do all these things to get my heart rate to go down. It wouldn't. There was medication. There was these physical movements they tried to do. Nothing was working. So then they said, we're going to need to cardiovert you, which is they put you to sleep and they shock your heart back into rhythm. So my husband signed some documents. I signed some documents. And the next thing I know, I was asleep and then awake. And there were like 9 doctors all around. It turns out in the end, stress can do some pretty wild things to the body. Not that I'm blaming myself, but I wasn't listening to my own cues and I wasn't taking care of myself the way I needed to take care of myself. And I didn't have any boundaries and I pushed it too far. For me, it was the most incredible awakening. It was also a big awareness because after the event, you would think, well, that's the end of that. And it wasn't, because so much more happened after that. I started to have my anxiety kicked up again. I was really nervous to be alone. I was afraid to fly. I was afraid to drive. What if this happens again? So then I had to go through this whole layer as like a mental rebirth of trusting my body again. And all that was going on while I was on BC Canada. I remember having panic attacks while hosting the show.
One person you credit a lot in terms of dealing with a lot of these anxieties and your ability to cope is your mom, mind over matter. Tell me a little bit about your mom.
My mom immigrated here when she was 5 years old with a trunk. Her family came here from England. They worked the farms. They lived in the top of barns. Her always looking for the silver lining ever since she was little has been something that I just admire so much. And even when I was a teenager, I can remember her talking about mindfulness. Remember back in the day when Oprah at 4:30 would always bring on these she brought mindfulness to the masses. She really did. So back in that time, my mom and I sat down and we watched The Secret and we would talk about, how to frame your mind and do all those things. She's really helped me in so many ways when things are rough, when she's experienced rough times, on how to find the right path. She's just my little light. I adore her.
And in 2023, a tough year. I mean, the end of ET Canada and the loss of your dad, two things to come at you at one time. But let's talk about your dad because he was one of the rocks of your life.
Yeah, he really was and is still. I talk to him every day. Yeah, I mean, he had a really rare brain disease called progressive supranuclear palsy. And if you knew my dad, he was just like a strong, silent type of guy. And so as this disease sort of crept in, we all knew something was wrong, but we couldn't quite put our finger on it. And in 2023, I don't want to say lost his battle, but he went to a better place. I truly believe that because he was not living the life that he deserved to live, for sure. But he was a fighter. I mean, he had COVID twice during COVID. I mean, he did the best. He fought the hardest he could to be around for us. And in the end, losing him was, I don't know, a parent it's that stable ground, And so when he left, it was really difficult. And again, another time where you have to get up on that stage again. And in many ways, being back on the stage that January gave me a peace because it's weird. When you go on stage and you do things, you can flip a switch after a while and you can just go. It also gives you a place of peace where you're not sitting in your feelings all the time.
It's interesting you say that because a lot of people will find a way to mask that with alcohol or substance abuses. And it's great that you had something where you could flip the switch and remind you that life still goes on, that you had that responsibility.
I wanted my kids to see, it was really important for me to show the kids, obviously, grief and how to feel it, because it's important to feel the grief and feel the sadness, but also to appreciate this life that we have and that you need to live it and you need to live it for the people that you're with and honor the life that you're given. And I had this beautiful life with my family, this incredible career that had given me so much, that show. And so getting back at it was really important. It wasn't easy all the time, but it was really important to get back at it. And then the show ended that September.
I thought it was probably going to be one of the most devastating things to you personally, but you said, in fact, if anything, it was a relief that I should have made that decision maybe a few years earlier, found a new tightrope to go on, and they took the tightrope away and I was okay.
There were so many people who loved that show and so many people who worked on the show that loved that show. So was I sad that the show itself was ending? Absolutely. It was a show that I think Canada still needed, eTalk's doing a fantastic job. But I also think competition is good. And I think it's really important to the landscape. So seeing the show end I was sad for that for Canada. But I have to say, as a person, as a professional, I also knew that in my soul, I wanted more. I wanted to talk about more things. I would go on the morning show with Carolyn and Jeff. And I was like, that's sort of like stirring something up in me. Like this is exciting. Talking about other things that are outside of entertainment. I still love talking about entertainment. I love talking to celebrities, doing all of that. But also there was more. I could feel that I wanted more.
let's sort of wrap the interview up talking a little bit about more out there. And I know that you're working on some stuff we can't discuss yet today, but you had your stint at hosting a show. You've got work ethic, you've got personality, you've got presence, and more importantly, you've got this incredible appetite for humanity. So is that the tease that we can get going forward, that we're going to see more of Cheryl in the future?
Listen, I have an incredible appreciation and gratitude towards global television for just sort of the bedrock and the foundation and the growth and the people that I had there. It was amazing. It was a fantastic time. And then even the time I spent at Rogers, albeit it was really short, I had a lot of fun there and I met a lot of really great people and some really great things happened there. And actually told me and reminding me of how much I love creating. And I still love this business very much. And there are different platforms and different ways to sort of scratch that itch, if you will. I do love talking about the humanity and I do love talking to people and bringing comfort. What I want people to, anyone who's listening to this, is to understand that it's okay to transition. It's okay to grow. Allow it to be exciting, allow it to be a little bit scary, but also look back on all the successes or all the lessons that you've had and know that those are stepping stones to where you're going next. And I have some exciting things coming up and I'm excited for those things.
You know, Cheryl, I always end my podcast with my 3 takeaways. And you used a word in the last sentence that to me roared through the entire episode, and it's gratitude. You're so grateful to the small town. You're so grateful to your parents, your husband, your kids, the people that employed you, the people that believed in you. And I think one of the great lessons in life, as big as you might get in life, this day you forget about the people, the Yodas in the world that helped you get to where you needed one, is a day that you lose everything. The second one is this concept of speak to me. And there's 2 ways that came through. The first was finding the things that speak to you, that you're passionate about, which I loved. I also loved the way you sort of use it in a different way. So when people are speaking at you, there's going to be negative and positive. Choose what you want to listen to. Focus on the positive and you can grow from it. Focus on what people are speaking in the negative and you're going to succumb to it. And I think that's a great lesson in life.
And I realized this when my dad passed, actually. This was my lesson. Obviously, it left a big hole. But I was like, I have a choice in how I'm going to react to his death. Either I can let it shut me down and do all the things, or I can find the beauty and the grace. I get to choose how I react here and how I'm moving forward. We always have a choice. Even in the most disastrous of things, there is a choice. It could be a small choice, it could be a big choice, but when you make one choice, it leads to the next choice and the next choice and the next choice. And that's what it is all about. And your energy, you got to follow your energy and where you want to go, not what's already happened. If something hurts, why are you reliving it? Why are you looking at it again? It's over there. Where are you going?
The final lesson, this combination of friction and fuel, that we're always going to face circumstances. And what I loved about the way you overcame them, whether that was somebody that wanted to hold you back or something you went after, is how hard you work. You shadowed. I was up to 3 a.m. I tried to edit to see if I could cut a story. I painted the office purple. I found this cat in the garbage, For people listening, today, I think a lot of times life is easy. Now with AI, you just say what you want, the video appears. The difference is you had that 10,000 hours of practice. You went in there and you said, no matter what it takes, and it wasn't to brag, this is just what it took for me to chase my dreams. I went into this just interested about your career. I'm walking away from this interview absolutely. You've got to become a keynote speaker. Cheryl, I've hosted conferences for the last 15 years all over the world. Your message, whether as a fireside chat or just out there telling your story, is what the audiences today need to hear, because right now we are succumbing to this overpowering negativity out there, and with it, then the world's impossible. And it's not.
It's not.
The reality is, if you focus on the positive, things have become possible.
I'd open to trying that.
Once again, a special thanks to RBC for supporting Chatter That Matters. It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.